week 11 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few defense DST units I have as sleeper options this week. The first one, the Washington football team. So the Washington football team were one of the top units taken in fantasy drafts coming into the season, but now they've been a train wreck all season. Now Chase Young is out for the season with the torn ACL, which obviously is a huge hit on the DST. So the Washington football team, they're just not getting the job done of late here, is this team. Week 7 versus Green Bay, 24 points allowed, 3 sacks, a fumble recovery, a block kick. Week 8 at Denver, 17 points allowed, 4 sacks, and a fumble recovery. In Week 10 versus Tampa, they did hold them down to 19 points, 2 win-throws. But right here, Week 11 at Carolina, very good matchup on paper. Panthers give up the 5th most fantasy points to defenses on the season. I know Cam Newton's starting at quarterback. We'll see if he could get it going, but I like Cam Newton a lot this week to have a good game versus Washington. That gives up the most fantasy points to defenses, but it wouldn't surprise me if Cam Newton has a mediocre game in this one and throws a few win-throws and takes a few sacks. I think Washington as a sleeper option is doable here, and they're available in 73% of fantasy leagues, because it wouldn't surprise me to see this game go one way or the other for the defense or the Panthers offense. The next defense I have is a sleeper option this week is the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles here, their defense has been hit or miss for the most part of the season here, but they got a pretty tough matchup versus the New Orleans Saints that give up the second least amount of fantasy points to defenses on the season. But obviously the Saints are without Jameis Winston, and obviously it's not the same Saints of the Drew Brees era where they're going to go up and down the field and score 30 or 40 points a game. So the last few weeks here, Philadelphia Eagle DST. Week 8 at Detroit, 6 points allowed, 6 sacks, a fumble recovery, and a touchdown. Week 9 versus the Chargers, 27 points allowed. And Week 10 at Denver, 13 points allowed, a sack, a fumble recovery, a touchdown, and a block kick. So it wouldn't surprise me to see the Eagles in this game get anywhere from 7 to 9 fantasy points versus this New Orleans Saint team. And the Saint team, like I mentioned, they're not the same. We'll see if Kamara plays, even though Mark Ingram filled in well, in my opinion, for Alvin Kamara. But right now, the Eagles, they're available in still a whopping 86% of fantasy leagues, and they're definitely a DST I have as a sleeper option this week. And the third and final DST I have as a sleeper option this week is the Cincinnati Bengals. I know this Bengal defense has been hit or miss as well this season, but now with a bye week resting and after a bad blowout loss in Week 9, you know this defense is licking their chops and they want to get back on the field, and I think they can make a few plays on Derek Carr and the Raiders. The Raiders offense, they don't have that many weapons, in my opinion, besides obviously Waller. Carr's a pretty decent quarterback, and Josh Jacobs is hit or miss as well on the season. So the last few games here for Cincinnati, Week 7 at Baltimore, 17 points allowed, 5 sacks. Week 8 at the Jets, 34 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 win-throws, a fumble recovery. In Week 9 versus the Cleveland Browns, like I mentioned, they got blown out. They gave up 35 points and 2 sacks allowed. But right here, off the bye, indoor ball game in Vegas, they don't got to deal with the weather elements. And I think they can make a few plays here, get a few sacks on Carr, and get maybe an intro or two. And they're available in 91% of fantasy weeks. So that's a few defense sleeper options I have here for Week 11 of the fantasy football season.